As per officials, bodies including that of a child were fished out from the floodplains of the Teesta River at the Golathar in Singh'S by rescue personnel. The state government has set up 26 relief camps in 4 affected districts, where a total of 1,025 people are taking shelter in 8 relief camps in Gangtok. The Bombay High Court has sought details from the Maharashtra government after it took suo motu cognizance of the deaths at the state government-run hospitals at Nanded and Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar. This comes after the doctors at the hospital cited a shortage in the supply of medicine and beds between September 30th and the 3rd of October. Nanded Government Medical College and Hospital in Maharashtra reported 35 deaths, 24 of those were in a single day. Meanwhile, the police have registered an FIR against the acting dean and a doctor on account of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Fresh violence broke out in Manipur's Imphal West district, where at least 2 houses were set on fire and several rounds of bullets were fired. Police said that the incident happened in New Keithilmanbi in Patsoy police station area around 10 p.m. on the 4th of October. After the attack, the accused fled the spot, triggering tension in the area. Security forces and fire services personnel brought the blaze under control. The Federation of the Indian Fantasy Sports has urged the Indian government to avoid retroactively imposing a 28% goods and services tax on online gaming, as it is deterring potential investors from engaging in this thriving sector. This call comes after the GST Council's August meeting, which concluded that online gaming should be subject to a 28% GST based on the face value of bets at the entry level. Subsequently, GST authorities have sent tax recovery notices to numerous online gaming companies. A British Sikh, Jaswant Singh Chahal, who tried to kill late Queen Elizabeth II at Windsor Castle on Christmas Day 2021, has been sentenced to 9 years imprisonment by a UK court. The 21-year-old had claimed that he wanted to assassinate the late monarch to avenge the 1919 Jallianwala Bagh massacre in Amritsar. The court was told that he found his life's purpose after hearing the massacre story during his 2018 family visit to India. Noting his mental health issues, the court ordered him to stay at a high-security psychiatric hospital in Berkshire. India's central bank, the RBI, has kept the repo rate unchanged at 6.5% for the 4th time in a row. Indian economists had widely expected the central bank to hold rates, keeping its focus on controlling inflation while maintaining a hawkish stance in the wake of rising global crude oil prices, the possibility of another rate hike in the United States, and the overall global slowdown.
And let's turn our attention now directly to the state of the world economy. And let's face it, there are challenges. There was a period, a long period, where the countries, especially in the US and other countries in the West, kept their interest rates really down. That led to debt building up. It led to a prolonged party. Asset prices were doing well. The stock market was going up. Everything seemed nice. But as with any bubble, that is tough to sustain over a long period of time. And in recent years, inflation has raised its head, rising debt burdens have raised their head, and then, of course, the war between Russia and Ukraine actually knocked the bottom, in a sense, out of this very rosy picture on the global economy that we were seeing. So we're going to turn our attention a little bit to try and tell you what is actually happening with the global economy. Is there going to be high interest rates for a long time? Is there going to be a recession? And what, therefore, could the impact be for India and, crucially, for the India story? Is it a problem for the India story, or is it potentially an opportunity?
Talks of a possible recession in the US have been swirling for several months now. Since last year, US has been facing one crisis after another. High inflation and interest rate hikes by Federal Reserve have been front and center amid the various challenges facing the economy. In fact, one of the reasons for the banking crisis last year was the sudden and aggressive rate hikes undertaken to curb inflation.
In determining the extent of additional policy firming that may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time, the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, and economic and financial developments. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting based on the totality of the incoming data and their implications for the outlook for economic activity and inflation, as well as the balance of risks.
Added to that, the impact of the Ukraine war on energy prices and supply chains is taking its toll as well. Over the last few weeks, the US economy has been hit by a fresh set of challenges. The auto strike by the biggest US auto workers union is expanding. As per reports, around 25,000 workers are on strike in 21 states. This strike has cost the economy billions of dollars.
Now we got tiers, we don't got cost of living adjustment, which has been part of every UAW contract since 1948 until 2009, when they said, look, we'll sacrifice, we'll take a hit so we can keep you all afloat. Now that they need help to stay afloat, the big three is, literally turning their backs on them. They're making record profits. It's about time to reward the very people for the reason they were even able to, again, survive, the Great Recession.
There are other indicators as well, which could be worrisome. U.S. manufacturing activity contracted in September for the 11th straight month. While this is a red flag, the silver lining is that the slump has been lower than analyst expectations. A last-minute deal to circumvent a government shutdown does not address the issues at hand, but simply pushes the immediate risks further down the road. Reports say a shutdown could impact GDP growth, knocking off a percentage point. Millions of American students will start getting student loan bills this month after the 3.5-year pandemic freeze expired. This could further hit the GDP numbers. A combination of all these factors show that the economy isn't out of the woods just yet. The question remains, how resilient is the U.S. economy, and what could be that tipping point where it slips into a recession?
So clearly there is an opportunity in all of this for India, but we should also warn that there could be consequences. India is the bright spark in the global economy right now, but there could be an impact. If there's actually a recession or stagflation hitting the West and hitting the global economy, there could be an impact on India. These, for example, could be some of the repercussions.
Despite various challenges, both at home and abroad, the Indian economy has demonstrated remarkable resilience in the past year, poised to be among the fastest growing globally. Recent decisions by the Reserve Bank of India, including a pause on rates in recent credit policy meetings and a downward trend in inflation numbers, have fueled expectations that the central bank may maintain the status quo on rates for a while, potentially leading to future interest rate cuts, contingent on the trajectory of inflation.
So far as the Reserve Bank is concerned, we have identified high inflation as a major risk to macroeconomic stability and sustainable growth. Accordingly, our monetary policy remains resolutely focused on aligning inflation to the 4% target on a durable basis. The MPC met on 4th, 5th and 6th October 2023. After a detailed assessment of the evolving macroeconomic and financial developments and the outlook, it decided unanimously to keep the policy repo rate unchanged at 6.5%.
In the hypothetical scenario of a U.S. recession, some experts opine that the impact on India might be less pronounced than initially anticipated. India's robust domestic market and internal demand act as significant buffers. India has taken strategic measures to mitigate potential effects, such as diversifying trade and investment partnerships. However, it is inevitable that any recession will have some impact on India, with certain sectors being more vulnerable than others. Exports, particularly in sectors like IT and pharma, could likely bear the brunt initially. The severity of this impact hinges on the depth of the potential recession.
Well, it's a great pleasure now to be joined by Daniel Giltrude, business analyst and economist. Daniel, if you could just take a look at the state of the world economy right now, what's your sense? There seems to be a growing feeling that inflation could be persistent. Recession may well be something that we are thinking about, so stagflation could be there. There seems to be a reasonable amount of pessimism around. How do you see the situation?
Well, it's very difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen in terms of will a recession hit. So what we need to do is look at the trends. That's what's important right now. And when we look at the trends and we see rising interest rates and we see inflation that remains stubborn, we see a job market in the United States which is starting to cool down. We see savings which had built up during the pandemic now dwindling, and we see household debt beginning to grow. These are signs of recession in the future. So I think we have to take a step back and say there are some serious concerns here, and what could be done from a policy standpoint to try to head this off.
So, if you look at it from the point of view of somebody, economics layperson listening to this conversation, the two are almost different things. Inflation means overheating. You need to raise interest rates to try and control inflation, which is price rise, which is obviously politically sensitive. Recession, on the other hand, means that there's no economic activity. Traditionally, you should have them, at other ends, each at different ends of the spectrum. But what you're saying is they could be coming together, which is stagflation, in other words. So in high prices are rising, but yet there's unemployment and yet economic activity is going down. Worst of both worlds.
Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about, is a stagflation situation, which, as you just said, that's the worst from both sides. So this is a dire economic scenario that you just don't want to be in. But if we look at what's happening around you, because interest rates are rising, you see money coming out of the stock market, and therefore the stock market coming down in value. We see strikes looming in the United States, which is going to put pressure on employers to have to pay more. We see student debt bills now becoming due. Spikes in oil prices, and overall there's a global slump economically. So again, I don't want to be somebody who is all negative, but the facts are the facts here. And this is all something that we need to be very cognizant of what could happen.
So in other words, it's almost a reversal of the situation that we were seeing a few years ago, where growth was proceeding okay and inflation was down and interest rates were down, which meant that economic activity could happen. The problem with this situation is that the authorities don't quite know what to do, because if they keep interest rates high, it will help with the inflation, but it makes the recession worse. And if you do it the other way around, then inflation persists.
That's true. So you have to look at it this way. The approach that's been taken right now in terms of supply and demand, which will be the cause of inflation. So we've had high demand and not enough supply. So the approach has been, let's try to bring down demand. Therefore, we can put supply and demand in balance and get inflation under control. So because tampering down demand doesn't seem to be working as effectively as they thought, how about not paying as much attention to the demand side and doing everything possible to lift the supply side, because no matter when this comes in balance, it doesn't matter where it is. So I have always been a proponent of the supply side of economics. I would have approached this a little bit differently and focused exclusively on supply, because if you can solve the problem that way, we don't have a lot of these issues which are now flaring up.
But some of the supply side issues are also linked to global factors that may not be in anybody's control, right? The war between, Russia and Ukraine, or whatever's happening in China, with China becoming a rogue actor in this entire philosophy. So those are problems that are not in anyone's control, and who knows when those will be solved.
Well, they weren't in control in the past, right? So you're right in saying, look, domestic and international events can occur that could be out of your control. But what I would hope that the United States has learned is you cannot have a single basis for your supply. Those supply chains need to be spread out domestically and internationally, so that you are not tied into, let's say, one area, which in the United States' case, in many ways, it was linked to China. And China is not necessarily a friend of the United States. So you have to look at that and say, look, we need to be able to get our supplies from many places around the world. And I think we're starting to see that change, specifically related to India. I think more supply chains are opening up for the United States through India.
Do you think the shift to countries like India is something that is going to become irreversible? It's not that the US and India don't disagree on some issues, they do, but there seems to be a growing feeling that a certain section and a large section of the supply chains do need to move to a country like India, which will, of course, be a big thing for the India story.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the issue here is to have countries that are doing business together be aligned economically, working together for mutual benefit, as opposed to each side trying to outdo the other. And I think that's what we're seeing with the United States and China. I think that there is a friendlier environment and relationship between the United States and India, which can be mutually beneficial. Look, India has a lot of production potential. The United States has a huge appetite for products. These things go together quite well. So yes, I do see a lot more international trade between the United States and India into the future.
And when you're looking at that supply side issues which we were just referring to, how in your view, does India compare to, let's say, a Vietnam or a Mexico, which is closer to the US or other countries in Southeast Asia? India much larger, of course.
Well, listen, that's the point. India has so much more potential because the amount of population and the amount of production that there's the potential for gives India the advantage. But of course, you also have to look at the pricing aspect and the quality. And I believe that if India puts itself in a position to be very competitive in the price and the quality of the goods that they're supplying, there's no reason why they would not be able to outperform other countries in Asia.
All right. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. And let's hope that happens, because I think India has been able to solve some of the issues around logistics and infrastructure and digital. So those used to be problems that have been sorted out. What, to your mind, would be some of the issues that you think companies and others in America would still be worrying about when it comes to India? Well, too far away, other issues, policy flip-flops, what would be the concern areas?
Well, look, anytime you're dealing with the international situation, there's a lot of unknowns, right? Because civil unrest, wars, and other things can crop up. I think it's a matter of American companies developing a trust in the stability of India's economy, its workforce, and its government. And I think Prime Minister Modi has really tried to focus in on this area in terms of growing that relationship and putting forth a message to say, listen, you can trust that India literally will deliver on its promises. And I think as that proves out more and more over time, the relationship between U.S. companies and U.S. consumers and India will have to grow.
All right, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's now move our attention to a groundbreaking development in the battle against malaria. Malaria, obviously a disease that has plagued the world, plagued the human species for a long, long time, and still creating havoc in many parts of the world, especially Africa. Now, the World Health Organization has just given its stamp of approval to the R21 matrix malaria vaccine, making it possibly a crucial milestone in the battle against malaria. And interestingly, this is a vaccine that may well be developed, between the Serum Institute and Oxford University acting in partnership once again, as happened with Covishield. So what is this new vaccine and what could its implication be? Before I talk to the experts, here's a look at the new vaccine and what it means.
A new affordable malaria vaccine that can be produced on a large scale has been hailed as a breakthrough by the World Health Organization. The R21 Matrix malaria vaccine, developed jointly by the University of Oxford and the Serum Institute of India, received the WHO nod this week after meeting the required safety and quality standards. The world's biggest vaccine manufacturer, India's Serum Institute, has agreed to produce 100 million doses a year and will double its manufacturing capability in the next 2 years. Here's why this vaccine can be a game changer. Malaria has been causing untold human suffering for millennia. The parasitic infection is caused by mosquitoes that can affect the brain and respiratory system and turn life-threatening if not promptly treated. Globally, it led to 247 million cases and around 619,000 deaths in 2021, an increase from 245 million in 2020. Africa is the worst affected. The infection kills 500,000 people in Africa every year, mostly under the age of 5, which accounts for 95% of global malaria cases.
We still have a major challenge with malaria, with over 220 million cases and around 600,000 deaths a year. And those are, majority of those are occurring in children under the age of 5 in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, we already have one licensed malaria vaccine, and that has been implemented in 3 countries so far and is starting to be rolled out next year in several others. One of the challenges has been the supply of that particular vaccine. So having a second vaccine available with similarly high efficacy, but also that has available supply and is priced to a level that makes it a cost-effective intervention, is really going to have a dramatic impact in sub-Saharan Africa.
But not just Africa. The WHO's Southeast Asia region accounted for about 2% of the burden of malaria cases globally in 2021. Although deaths due to malaria have come down sharply in the last few years, India is also one of the countries badly affected by the infection. According to official figures, in 2021, India reported 79% malaria cases in the region and 83% of all malaria deaths. The Oxford jab is called R21 and requires children to have 4 doses. Trials run by Oxford University in Burkina Faso, Kenya, Mali and Tanzania prove it's around 75% effective at preventing malaria. Most of the vaccines will be manufactured for high endemic countries in Africa, and their rollout is expected to begin by mid-2024. But the big advantage of this jab is its cost. The doses would cost between $2 and $4.
Today, it gives me great pleasure to announce that WHO is recommending a second vaccine called R21 Matrix M to prevent malaria in children at risk of the disease. In areas with seasonal transmission, it reduces symptomatic cases of malaria by 75% in the 12 months following a 3-dose series of the vaccine. At a cost of between $2 and $4 a dose, it's comparable with other recommended malaria interventions and other childhood vaccines. As a malaria researcher, I used to dream of the day when we would have a safe and effective vaccine against malaria. Now we have two.
Why has it taken so long to develop a vaccine against malaria? R21 is only the second vaccine against the deadly disease. People have been trying to make malaria vaccines for over 100 years, but the complexity of the malaria-causing parasite's life cycle and their ability to hide within human cells to evade the immune system has prolonged the development of an effective jab. It's only last year that the WHO formally endorsed RTSS or Mosquirix, the world's first vaccine, a result of over 30 years of research and development. But its efficacy is modest and the hunt for newer vaccines continues. Despite decades of research and over 20 clinical trial candidates, mosquito nets remain the most effective prevention method in the fight against deadly malaria.
Well, who better to now try and understand this entire new vaccine from than Dr. Nina Velecha, who's the former regional advisor malaria at the World Health Organization and also former director ICMR at the National Institute of Malaria Research. So, Dr. Velecha, you know more about this than just about anybody else. So tell us, how important is this new vaccine? It's being called a breakthrough. Is it a real breakthrough, you think?
Thank you, Vikram, for having me on the show. Yes, as you rightly said, this is a breakthrough because we have been having good tools to control and prevent malaria, like good diagnosis tools and treatment, and also preventive tools like bed nets and insecticides. But still, we have been seeing more than 500,000 deaths of children in Africa region due to malaria. And also, according to World Malaria Report in 2021, more than 600,000 deaths were reported in the globe, and 96% of them were from Africa. So therefore, we needed other tools, additional tools, and we already have one vaccine which was approved in 2021, but the demand and supply gap has been huge. So now with availability of this new vaccine, I think there will be a lot of decrease in the gap between the demand and supply. And also we will see that the number of deaths of these young children will definitely be reduced, and it will have a great public health impact.
So the first vaccine that was produced, Mosquirix, which has been out for a couple of years, how, from the reports that you are seeing, what is the efficacy of the new vaccine compared to the earlier one?
Actually, there has not been any head-to-head comparison as such between the two vaccines. But generally, it is seen that both the vaccines are equally safe and effective. And for the present vaccine, the phase 3 trials, which were conducted in more than 4,800 children in Africa, the efficacy of 75% has been seen to prevent the disease. And this has been seen by using 4 doses, 3 primary doses with 1 month interval, and later a booster after 1 year. And this has been used in the age group of 5 months to 36 months.
Now, these are, of course, vaccines, right? So we've seen there is always some hesitancy about vaccines in some part of the world, luckily a lot less in India and Africa than in some countries of the West. Do you think it'll be easy to get these vaccines out to the mass population so that a major battle is won against malaria?
I think so, because the experience of using the earlier vaccine has shown, and it was a WHO coordinated implementation program in 3 countries, in Ghana, Malawi, and Kenya. And the uptake was very good. And even it was seen that even during COVID-19, the implementation program went well. When there is so much mortality due to disease, the acceptability is definitely better. And then, of course, there is a need of advocacy and, educating people so that they can, and along with, if it is done along with the other immunization program, which is actually what is being visualized, then definitely the take-up would be better, because people do get their children below 5 vaccinated for other diseases.
And of course, this entire partnership between Oxford University and Serum Institute, we've already seen its impact with Covishield. So to that extent, it's a partnership that is tried and tested.
Yes.
All right. Ma'am, if you can just talk to us about the battle against malaria. What is thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands of years that humans have been battling the mosquito. Why has it been so difficult to actually eradicate malaria? We've eradicated other diseases, but not malaria. What's the problem?
So it's not that we have not been successful with malaria. Many countries have already eliminated malaria. I mean, when we say it is not eradication, that it hasn't gone from the earth, but there are, in particular countries, there is zero malaria indigenous transmission. This has happened. But I mean, except Africa, where the transmission has been so high. So there are many factors. You know, it is a disease of tropical and subtropical regions, the climate factors, the mosquitogenic conditions, and the presence of vector. Here there are two hosts. One is vector and one is human host. So the presence of vectors, and in some areas like Africa, the vector is very efficient vector. We say it can transmit disease very, very efficiently. So all these factors, and along with that, there have been, the technical issues like drug resistance, insecticide resistance, because the insecticides which are used in bed nets also, resistance to them also develop. And then, of course, the implementation of these measures, as well as, as I said, this is the disease of poor. So sometimes the access to those areas for implementation of various measures where these people live, where the malaria is seen more, the access becomes very difficult. So all these factors have led to presence of malaria, but definitely in like Southeast Asia region has done well. There has been a lot of quite a substantial decrease in malaria over time. Even in India, there has been a decrease in malaria. But definitely, yes, the targets of malaria elimination, which have been set in many regions like 2030, I mean, definitely for that one has to accelerate many efforts like prevention and good management, using new tools as they are available, because this is a dynamic process and we can't do with business as usual. And then one more important fact, Vikram, I would like to say that whether it is a country or within the country, the malaria situation is very different. Even not even states, like if we talk in India, between districts, the situation is different. So the programs have to see what measures would be effective at local level. And again, as I would like to say again, which WHO says, one size does not fit all. So one has to see which measures would be best for a particular area, so that we can judiciously, effectively, and economically use those methods. Then we need to have better surveillance, strengthen our primary healthcare system. And of course, these tools, as they develop, they need to be adapted after debating, because WHO issues recommendations and gives guidance, but the countries have to debate within their country according to their system and regulatory practices to use those new tools as they are available. So definitely we need to accelerate our efforts if we want to eliminate malaria. And in areas like Africa, where there is such a high burden, definitely to decrease mortality is the first priority there. So we need to use vaccines and all available. I mean, the vaccines need to be used with all available tools or interventions at present.
All right, Dr. Vadecha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Vikram.
And let's move now to our regular segment, Global News Headlines about India. What are people in the rest of the world saying about India? Here's a look at what's been there in some of the world press.
According to Al Jazeera, Canada has shifted its tone regarding the Hardeep Singh Nijjar case, with top leaders indicating a desire not to escalate tensions with India. This development comes after Canada initially made public accusations against India, resulting in diplomatic repercussions such as the expulsion of diplomats and the suspension of visa services. As per the report, the role of Western allies, including the United States, is maintaining peace between Canada and India. The report also points out that the West does not want to antagonize India due to its strategic importance in countering Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific region. An initiative that reflects both countries' commitment to sustainable development and cooperation in critical sectors, India's National Investment and Infrastructure Fund and the Japan Bank for International Cooperation have jointly launched a $600 million fund to invest in sustainability projects as per Nikkei Asia. JBIC will contribute 51% of the funding, while India will provide the remaining portion. A report in Al Jazeera quoting experts says that the BJP wants to use the Cricket World Cup sporting event as a platform to strengthen its position and potentially secure a third term in office. This involves political influence in selecting venues and engaging in rhetoric that some observers believe is aimed at launching another term in office for the BJP. The article further goes on to say that the ruling BJP's control over the BCCI and its influence in the ICC have amplified the political aspect of the event.
And before we go, let's turn our attention to some really good news. The Indian performance at the Asian Games. India's best performance ever, by a mile. The best performance in terms of overall medals, the best performance in terms of gold medals. It's been quite a fantastic few days for Indian sports. And it's also heartening to see it's not just in athletics and shooting, which have been the traditional sports that India has done very well in. It's across the board, medals and gold medals in sport after sport. Look at what's happening with archery, for example, and then, of course, a range of other sports where you would not necessarily have been expecting medals or a fantastic Indian performance, but it's been good going. India doing really well at the Asian Games. Here's a quick recap of some of the highlights from the Asian Games.
The Asian Games in Hangzhou stand as a vibrant testament to India's growing stature in the world of sports. Across disciplines, from shooting to compound archery and athletics, India has shattered records and exceeded all expectations at this edition of the Asian Games. The sheer magnitude of India's achievement is underscored by a fascinating fact. In the history of the Asian Games, India's previous best finish yielded 70 medals. Yet in Hangzhou, we are closing in on the 100-medal mark. In the previous edition in Jakarta in 2018, we secured the 8th position on the medal tally with those 70 medals. Fast forward to Hangzhou, and we proudly stand at the 4th spot, trailing only behind China, Japan and South Korea. An extraordinary leap for Team India.
Well, I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to now be joined in the India story by somebody who's really been keeping the Indian flag flying. ESHA, thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure, speaking to you. ESHA, I think, 4 medals at these Asian Games. It must be a fantastic feeling.
Yeah, it is, and it's taking a lot of time to take it all in.
Yeah. Just talk us through it. When you went inside, the shooting is over now, so now you've had some time to digest it. Talk to us about the entire experience. You're going in there at your age, you're competing out there, winning a gold, winning silvers. Talk to us a little bit about it. What does it feel like?
It felt very surreal at the moment when I was winning, and it was my first games ever, so I did not know much what to expect. But I really liked the way it was posted and the way the hospitality of people, and I really liked the way the Chinese people really took care of all of us, and the food was arranged so well for us, and the range was absolutely mind-blowing. The audience was the loudest one I have ever witnessed. And the whole experience is something I think I will keep with me forever.
And when you were shooting, even in the team competition, you had people not that old, but slightly more experienced than you, like Manu and Rhythm. Were they telling you whether to keep calm? Were you telling yourself how to keep calm when you were actually shooting?
We don't really talk much during the competition because if you see, even if it is a team category, it's still an individual sport. It's just that we play our own game and the points keep adding up. And the total of 3 of us is how the team is calculated. So, but yeah, we have a pretty good bond and we are always there for each other. I'm very grateful to be part of such a strong team.
India's done really well in the Asian Games, and I'll come to that in a couple of minutes. But the particular strength of India in areas like shooting, what do you think accounts for it? And if you can take us through the experience of when you got into shooting and a sort of support, because obviously there must be a strong support system that has been built up by now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy the way our federation has been taking care of us, and hats off to the support staff, the physios and the coaches who've been working so hard with us. And our competition in India itself gives us a lot of help because we have a pretty good competition domestically if you see our matches. And I feel that's why we perform so much better.
How old were you when you decided that you wanted to take up shooting? And what was the next step after you'd made that decision?
I was 9 years old.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to understand. 9-year-old and you decide to get into shooting. What happens after that? How do you go? Whom do you contact? Where do you get the equipment and the training from?
So my dad, since he's a sportsman, he wanted me to get into sport. That's how I got into this field. And his friend is a shotgun shooter, my uncle Gautam Chandani, and he knew Gagan Narang closely, so he recommended his. And that time in 2014-15, we didn't have shooting ranges in Hyderabad, and Gachibowli was the only one which people could go and experience shooting. And he told us to go and go and enroll in Gun for Glory. And that was in Pune at that time. They had very few academies at that time. So we had to go on and off to Pune, I think almost every 2-3 months. And I got my basics very strong. So I was looking forward to the state championship the next year. I was, I think, 10 or 11 years old. I don't really remember. But it was a goal for me. And that's how my journey started.
Right. But, you would have argued that, a country like India would be strong in, wrestling. With our population, there'd be facilities for things like wrestling, cricket, of course. But shooting needs equipment, shooting needs ranges. So the fact we're able to produce so many champions, is it something about, mental abilities, the ability to keep calm? Or is it that somebody who's talented does get the ranges and the equipment to be able to compete?
If you see academies, especially like Gun for Glory, where you have everything you need, you just need to get enrolled. So I feel academies like this really help people come and get introduced to the sport, even if you are not financially stable. And I feel our government is doing so well with these schemes like Khelo India and supporting them from the grassroots level itself, so they don't have to worry about such things. So I think I'm very proud to be representing a nation who's so passionate about sports.
And that's something, Isha, wanted to ask you, because this obviously has been India's best ever Asian Games, and by some margin. So clearly it doesn't happen overnight. There's obviously been a lot of work that has been put into this. Talk to us a little bit about the entire atmosphere there for the Asian Games contingent, and as the realization is dawning in that this is going to be a really good Asian Games for us.
You mean the atmosphere in the village?
Yeah, in the entire village, among the entire Indian contingent.
I think we were pretty confident from the start, like even in the jersey event that we were introducing the jerseys, our sports minister was very confident and very glad to have somebody like Mr. Anurag Thakur, and he is so passionate about sports, and I feel having somebody like that really helps. And he was very confident that we would be performing so well, and so that's what happened. And I feel throughout the years we've become so stronger in all fields of sports, and a really big thank you to our government and to SAI.
So the rest of the people, so of course you want to spend a lot of time with the shooting contingent, but when you get a chance to interact with the other athletes out there, and were all of them also getting the sense that yes, they're getting the support, and they will be able to do really well this time?
We did get to meet a few of them, but we couldn't go for all of the matches. Like I wanted to see a few sports, but then our travel dates unfortunately were, as soon as the matches got finished, we had to come back. But if I had the chance, I would definitely watch all of the games as much as I could.
All right. Just looking ahead now, Isha, your plans and the plans of the team. Obviously, the last Olympic Games weren't the best for India when it came to shooting. Paris coming up. How do you think India is going to be doing?
I'm pretty confident, and I feel we have one of the strongest players ever. And looking at the way Asian Games was, I think we're going to do pretty good.
And what's your immediate plan? Are you going to take a break right now and relax for a bit and go out and see some movies, or are you back to training?
I have very few days because we have Asian Championship coming in a week, I think. We have a camp. So I have very few days I have to get back to my training. But the way I like to unwind is just spending as much as time as I can with my family, eating as much as I can of my mom's food because I have missed it a lot.
Well, please tell your mother from our side that whatever she's feeding you is doing wonders for the country. Isha, many congratulations once again. 4 medals, fantastic performance out there and a gold. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, so great performance at the Asian Games, but of course the nation's attention is now already shifting to the World Cup, and we're going to be talking to you about it at great length over the next few weeks as well. That's it on this episode of the India Story. It also wraps up these 2 or 3 weeks that I've been roaming around the US trying to figure out what's happening in the other parts of the world and how it could impact the India Story. Be back in Delhi next week, so do join me again for another episode of the India Story, this time from back in India. Bye for now.
India's global voice.